All right, I'm excited to be back with episode 14 of the podcast. I feel like it's been a few days, Don. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you, Jazz. Good to chat to a human. I'm
Yeah.
out here very isolated in London, but
Mhm.
yeah, stoked to talk again. Our last episode was our first ever guest. It was pretty cool to talk about Jiu Jitsu from a coach's perspective. And yeah, looking forward to delving back into some MMA also.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the chat with Jeff. He was very insightful. And also just got to mention to our audience that Donnie sent me video footage of him break falling on the cement, which I thought was very Tony Ferguson-esque.
Yeah, okay, that's true. Yeah, so the thing is, look,
Desperate times.
desperate times. What actually happened was I went downstairs in the apartment block that I'm staying in to just like I was actually mostly skipping and shadow boxing, but I had intended to take my yoga mat down and just do a bit of shrimping and rolling, break falls, technical get ups on my yoga mat, and I forgot to take it down. And then I was like, I'm not going up there all sweaty. I might run into an old person who might freak out
Yeah.
fairly.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I'm just going to, test how effective my break falling is. And if I mess up, I'm going to feel it. So, yeah, then I sent it to you and you were like, Tony Ferguson, champ shit only.
Yeah, exactly. So Don, I thought we can just briefly run through some UFC stuff. Obviously, things are turning again in the UFC cog. Dana White, high energy and excited to get back with it. I guess like we all are.
Yeah.
So it seems like they're doing 3 back-to-back cards. It looks like they're doing a Saturday, a Wednesday, and a Saturday. The first card being May 9th, which is headlined by Justin and Tony. And then they've put together the Cejudo and Cruz fight,
Yeah.
which is going to be very exciting. And then Francis versus Rozennik, which are like my top 3 fights, but those are the headlining fights. And then they're doing May 13th, which is Wednesday. That's headlined by Anthony Smith versus Glover Teixeira. I didn't realize Teixeira is coming off a 3-fight win streak. I feel like he's quite an OG of the game. It's like he's been around for ages. So that's going to be exciting. And I think Anthony Smith just lost to Jones, or has he fought since Jones?
I think he's fought since then. And look, he's also coming off a street fight just a couple of weeks ago in his house.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's a crazy story. If anyone hasn't listened to that, you should go and check out his interview.
So I think he won that one, although John Jones gave him some lip on Twitter saying, if someone came into my house, they wouldn't be leaving alive.
Right.
But, I don't know. Dominic Reyes would probably be leaving alive if he broke into John Jones's house. So I don't know, man. I think it's an exciting fight. Just looking at Anthony Smith's record here, I'm pretty sure that he's got a win over Gustafsson after the Jones loss.
Nice.
A rear naked choke in the first round over Gustafsson. So that's not a joke, and Anthony Smith is not a joke. He didn't really put his best foot forward against John Jones, and credit to Jones also, he dominated the fight.
Mm-hmm.
But he went 5 rounds. He wasn't getting beat up too badly.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it's an exciting fight. And then on May 16th, which is the following Saturday, is going to be Alistair Overeem versus Walt Harris. And I'm actually really excited to see the return of Walt Harris. I wasn't sure if you heard what happened with his stepdaughter.
Yeah, I did hear that.
Yeah, so that was like a really sad story. For those of you that don't know, his stepdaughter was kidnapped and was missing for a while, and then they actually, very unfortunately, found her body. So you can check that out if you're interested. But yeah, excited to see him come back. And then obviously, Alistair Overeem just recently fought Rozennik, where he had his lip gashed. So he'll be looking to bring back some heat. So yeah, some back-to-back cards, exciting. Hopefully none of it falls through. I think at least the first 2 are happening in Florida.
Yeah.
So let's hope, fingers crossed, that these ones can actually happen. And apparently Fight Island is still going ahead and should be ready by June.
Yeah, Fight Island is going to be an octagon on the beach. It's becoming more and more something out of like some crazy Mortal Kombat film. We'll see. But yeah, just going back to May 9th, so excited actually for the Dominic Cruz-Henry Cejudo fight. We've spoken a little bit about it before, but there's no reason to think Henry Cejudo won't be in great form because of how he's been on this run since before beating Demetrius Johnson. And Dominic Cruz, if he turns up the old Dominic Cruz after this long break, that's incredible fights. And we can go back in the next few weeks and look at how they fought against some of their common opponents like Demetrius. That'd be pretty interesting to look at. Yeah,
no, I'm very excited for that fight. And there's going to be a lot of smack talking between those two. Cruz and Cejudo like to talk a little bit of shit. So anyway, Don, we were chatting the other day and we thought it'd be cool to maybe discuss what we would say are like our favorite trilogies that have ever happened in MMA.
Yeah.
Do you want to fire it off? I'm excited to hear what you got to say.
Yeah, so like I just went back and looked at the GSP Matt Hughes trilogy. Epic series of fights. But I think one of the amazing things about it is that you see this development in GSP over the course of these three fights. So the first one happens in 2004. He's already a great fighter, but he's not quite at Matt Hughes' level. He gets submitted with an armbar. But by the time of the second one, he's had 2 years to prepare, and he's a much more complete fighter. And you see him just stuffing takedowns. And in fact, I think between the second and third fight, I don't think GSP was taken down once. And Matt Hughes shot quite a bit. So it already says something about the level of GSP's wrestling. He's dictating the takedowns. He's stuffing them. He's dominating positions in the clinch, and he's moving from the clinch to really sharp takedowns in both of those. Well, mostly in the third fight, but in the second, he's really stuffing them. Then he's showing his striking in that second fight. At the end of the first round, he throws a killer Superman punch, follows it up with 2 left hooks. Left hook Larry, the same way he knocked out or put down Michael Bisping.
Right.
And Matt Hughes gets saved by the bell at the end of the first round. The ref could have called it right there. Yes. Second round, they're on their feet again. He throws kind of a Muay Thai switch kick, a lead leg roundhouse kick, kind of like Edson Barboza throws a lot. You quickly retracting the lead foot and then throwing it. But he throws it so quickly, there's hardly a pullback. It's an incredible kick.
Yeah, just no time to cover up either. It's just
no time because you don't see that coming. There's so little indication that it's coming, and it reminds you got to bear in mind GSP he's a high level jiu-jitsu guy, and he's obviously a high level wrestler. But his first martial art was Kyokushin karate, and that's the most legit of the karate styles. It's full contact karate, So that kind of kick he's been doing since he was old enough to throw his leg up,
Yes.
And then the third fight, you've got kind of peak GSP, where he's just completely dominating a fighter of the caliber of Matt Hughes. He's taking down at will, ground and pound. He's not just sitting in the guard, landing shots. He's passing guard. He takes his back in the first round. He takes his back in the second round. In fact, I think he's on his back at the end of the first round. Takes his back in the second round, goes to Kimura, turns it into an armbar, and submits Matt Hughes with an armbar the same way he was submitted in the first fight.
Yeah.
So he kind of comes full circle. And the way that he, when you think about the fact that GSP only lost to Matt Hughes and Matt Serra and avenged both those losses, and you think about the fact that with Matt Hughes, he avenges it twice. It just goes so much to the argument that on in terms of record and in terms of accomplishment, the guy is the best ever to do it,
For sure.
So he kind of knew before the second fight. He was saying, "Look, I'm not going to make another mistake. Like I'm not that. He was basically saying like, I will be perfect when I fight Matt Hughes again.
Right.
And for the
That just shows GSP's work ethic too.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, he was basically a perfect fighter over the course of the second and third fight. So
Yeah,
I loved it, man. It was inspiring.
Yeah, that's a great trilogy. And then just talking about GSP, I've been seeing the UFC has been releasing a lot of old school videos, obviously giving the fans some content. And one of the fights they just released was GSP's UFC debut, which I have queued up to watch. So that should be fun. And then they were doing some old UFC. I saw one was Shamrock versus Mark Coleman. So really cool to go back and watch those in like decent quality, and instead of having to like scourge YouTube for shitty quality videos.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Don, what I was thinking is as I've said before, I love the Pride days. Those were like, that's what really got me into MMA. And it's hard not to think about Rampage Jackson versus Wanderlei Silva. And I was actually looking at some dates, and it's crazy. They have their rivalry spanned 15 years. They had their first fight in 2003. And then they relatively recently fought at Bellator 206, which was in, 2018.
Yeah, that's
great. This is actually a quadrilogy. It's not even a trilogy. I didn't realize that.
Oh,
so in the first fight, what's that?
I didn't know that either, that it was 4 fights.
Yeah, it's crazy. So their first fight was in Pride Final Conflict, which was actually a tournament. So both of them had fought multiple times before the final where they met, which is crazy too. Like, think about like how tough one fight is. Can you imagine fighting like potentially 3 times, like 3 wars?
Yeah, it's so crazy because my brother has just watched Warrior, that MMA movie with Tom Hardy.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Oh, you must check it out. I mean, it's a cool movie because Tom Hardy's such a good actor.
Really? Okay.
So, but basically, I was chatting to my brother on the phone about this movie, Warrior. And he was like, yeah, it's a cool movie. Tom Hardy's great, but like, it's a bit unrealistic. Like, these guys are fighting like 3-4 times in a night. And I was like,
there you go.
It's not that unrealistic. Like, people used to do that in the Pride days, in the first UFC days.
UFCs, 100%. It's absolutely crazy. And I mean, I'd seen some and they were absolute wars. I mean, guys were limping out of the ring, out of the octagon, and then you got to go back and fight. Yeah. Absolutely crazy. So that was their first encounter when they both came to the final. 2003, and actually I saw an interesting stat. That audience was 53,000 in Japan. How that is huge.
That's mad.
And it just goes to show how popular MMA was in Japan, and how much, when I once spoke about Pride putting on a show, it was just this epic show. So anyway, in their first encounter, Wanderlei, I just need to say that Wanderlei, when I started watching Pride, and everyone like agree, I've heard Rogan speaking of, he was just one of the most scariest, vicious, like he had this crazy warm-up, and his knees and his soccer kicks. So he landed up finishing Rampage in their first fight with about 20 vicious knees. It was just brutal. Got him in the Muay Thai clinch and just threw off knees. It was brutal. I mean, if you haven't seen Wanderlei in his prime fighting in Pride, you have to go back and watch. He's just one of the most vicious guys in his day. Then they fought in Pride 28, which was 2004. So almost like a year later. And this was actually for the belt. So this wasn't through a tournament.
Right.
This is for the belt, for the middleweight belt. And again, Wanderlei knocked him out with some vicious knees, not as brutal as the first fight. I mean, the exchanges they had between those 2 fights was just absolutely epic. I think those were the 2 main fights, I think, in history in Pride. They went down as like some of the most vicious, exciting fights there was. Just crazy exchanges, brutal shots. And then they think their third fight was in UFC 92 2008. So they're already like kind of, in my opinion, edging out of their prime. That's why those first 2 Pride fights for me were just epic. But in the third fight in the UFC, Rampage lands a beautiful left hook on Wanderlei. Wanderlei came in for a flurry, not very calculated. Then Rampage lands a beautiful left hook and takes that win. And then, as I mentioned, they fought in Bellator for the 4th time in 2018. I mean, just like crazy. These oaks are still fighting. You could see they were significantly older. They were also fighting at heavyweight.
Yeah.
They don't want to cut weight. Still the same mental like fight. You could see they just wanted it, but just not the same athletes, obviously.
So what's the score?
So it's now 2-2. So Vanderlei. So at the end of you can actually go and watch. It's one of the few fights of theirs that is on Bellator's website, like good quality, high definition. And you hear at the end of the fight, Vanderlei going, "All right, you two, we need to go again to settle the score." So I mean,
it's got to stop, man.
Yeah, the guys are getting old, but geez, those first two prides are like urge everyone to go out and watch those fights. Any fights in pride, but with Vanderlei, those early days, just the scariest dude.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was actually a quadrilogy. I don't know how many of those there are in MMA actually. We'll try to get that fact for our audience at the next pod.
That'd be interesting.
All right, Don, and just before we wrap up, you're reading your hefty book, Choke.
Got it right here.
I'm excited for you to drop us a little bit of wisdom of what you've been reading.
Yeah, bro, a bit more free advertising for my man, Roberto Pedreira. It doesn't have to be free if he wants to pay us. Yeah, dude, it's an unbelievable book. Like I said before, the sort of level of detail. He writes year by year. Each chapter is a year. And like the level of detail and research, I'm in like 1914 or 1915. So just a couple of cool sort of interesting tidbits around this time. I think I'd told you before that at the turn of the 20th century, people are already practicing jiu-jitsu somehow, mostly through books. And the police in Brazil are using jiu-jitsu out of this belief that it looks effective for people who might not be that strong or athletic or big. But the first kind of Japanese jiu-jitsu instructors, instructors, they come to Brazil in this like completely crazy way. So most people who are interested in like the history of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, they know about Mitsuyo Maeda, who was like a famous judo guy. Yeah, Japanese judo guy who goes over to Brazil and ends up teaching Carlos Gracie, amongst others, who see him do a demonstration. They're like, please teach us. And he does. But like I said, already at least 15 years before, people are like reading these books. And then about 2 years before, there's a Brazilian Navy ship that's traveling from Honolulu to Japan. And to avoid bad weather, it like veers off to this island called Wake Island, which is a tiny little island that was actually the site of a battle between the Japanese and the Americans in the Second World War. But when it stops at Wake Island to avoid this weather, it finds 20 survivors of a wrecked Japanese fishing ship.
Oh, no way.
So it's like, hop on, we're going to Japan anyway, we'll drop you there. And so they do that. But 3 of the Japanese guys are like, I mean, he doesn't go into detail about like their thinking or what went into this, but 3 of them are like, no, we'll just come with you to Brazil. And 2 of those guys are like, yeah, we know some jiu-jitsu. We'll teach jiu-jitsu when we get there. And so one of them, Sada Miyako, goes back to Brazil and starts like competing and putting on these exhibitions. And it's totally crazy. And it's before Maeda even gets there.
Wow. So sorry, what year are we talking? Do you remember?
Talking 1913, 1914.
Okay.
And then he quite famously has a fight with a Brazilian capoeira guy who knocks him out. And you don't really know, like at the time, these fights were like, some of them were fake. Some of them were like basically professional wrestling with people throwing real techniques in, and some of them were real. And it's kind of hard to know, but it seemed like this one was real. So he eventually leaves. But even before Maeda comes, there's a Brazilian guy named Mario Alexo, he's actually famous as a fencer, like a sword fighting fencer. And he starts adding capoeira and jiu-jitsu, which he says he learned from somewhere, but he may have just learned from a book, and starts teaching all of the stuff together in his dojo, in what the author of this book describes as like a precursor to Jeet Kune Do, which was Bruce Lee's kind of amalgamation of martial arts. And a lot of people talk about Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's vibe, as one of the origins of mixed martial arts, because he was throwing everything together. So this Brazilian guy is taking fencing stances, which Bruce Lee also took. He's taking capoeira kicks, and he's taking Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and he's saying, I've got this style that's better than everything. A year before Maeda comes and meets the Gracies. So that's where I am. It's totally mind-blowing. Like, you know, the images of like wrecked Japanese fishing ship and these guys just saying like, take us to Brazil. We've got skills we can show people.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. And
fascinating.
fascinating.
Well, I'm enjoying you sharing these tidbits of knowledge and history. I'll skip reading the hefty volume, and you can just keep us informed as you go. It's super interesting.
Yeah, I'll just summarize the book as we go, and Mr. Pedreira will either appreciate that or hate that I'm doing it.
No, I'm sure you'll appreciate it. I'm enjoying it. So yeah, thanks, Don.
Sweet.
That's it for now. Another good episode under the belt, and we look forward to the next one.
Sweet jazz.
All right, Don. Chat to you soon.
Cheers, man.